Would you be the jerk for telling your own dad he's lucky your mom chose to stay with him? We'll get into that in a bit, but first, am I the jerk? My husband left me alone at 29 weeks pregnant for the weekend. My husband John, 24, left me home alone during the 4th of July weekend. I'm 29 weeks pregnant and I'd begged him not to go. John is very close to his family, but we live around 3 hours away, so we don't visit them often. Whenever we have multiple days off, John tends to make solo trips to see them. He spent 4 days visiting them during Mother's Day and another 3 days during the 4th of July weekend. This situation upsets me greatly because I'd asked him not to go. I was crying and practically begging, but he still left. A little background, our pregnancy is considered high risk due to multiple miscarriages, and I have a single vessel umbilical cord. Last year around this time, I had a miscarriage of our first girl, and now I'm 29 weeks pregnant with another girl. I've been dealing with a lot of anxiety about history repeating itself, so I pleaded with John not to leave me home alone. Unfortunately, I couldn't go with him because I couldn't take time off work, and these plans were made last minute, less than 2 weeks in advance. Additionally, we have 2 dogs and 3 cats that we would need to arrange care for during such a busy weekend. These dogs are stranger reactive, so we have to let our friends know in advance if we need them to come watch our dogs. I also want to mention that we're set to spend 3 days with his family in 3 weeks, already planned, so I don't understand why he was so insistent on going this weekend. I've been a bit short with him all weekend, and now he's saying I'm in the wrong for being upset that he chose to see his family instead. I don't see how I can move past him leaving me at vulnerable time. Am I the jerk? Edit, a little more context. He was the one that wanted kids. After 2 miscarriages, I was done trying, but he really wanted to try again, and this is the 3rd try. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing down there. He's staying with his cousin, visiting family is all he says. I know he's at his cousin due to his location, but besides that, it's nothing super important from what I understand. I think it's pretty obvious that the husband's priorities are all out of whack here, especially considering he was the one who was lobbying to keep trying for this kid in the first place. He wants his cake and he wants to eat it too. He wants OP to bear his child and deal with a very difficult pregnancy, but also not bother him with any of the difficult details, or especially not these needy moments that they seem to try to escape. Impressive Dog 9845 wrote, "Obviously it's too late now, but babe, this is not the person to have a child with. The health risk to you and your unborn baby, let alone your anxiety, seem like they're no big deal to him. What are you doing willfully procreating with this man? I'm really sorry that I don't have anything productive or helpful to say to you right now." Opalan wrote, "He's also only 24. Chances are OP's not significantly older than him, so why hurry her so much to get pregnant again? She just had a miscarriage a year ago and less than a half a year later she was pregnant again. The least he should have done is given her more time to heal physically but also mentally from that experience. He's already a jerk for this. Disappearing and letting her alone for days with a risky pregnancy and 5 pets to take care of makes it far worse." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy getting to decide whether or not all of these people are jerks, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, am I the jerk for kicking my sister and her family out in the middle of the night in a different country? So I, 28-year-old female, have moved to the US 3 years ago with my husband, 30-year-old male, after getting our green cards approved. We moved to Central Florida, notorious for all its tourist attractions. Since we moved, my sister, 33-year-old female, and her husband, 37-year-old male, nephew, 13-year-old male, and niece, 11-year-old female, have visited every year around this time. We love to host and even bought a house to accommodate family and friends visiting. 2 guest beds. The issue started on the 3rd day of their visit. I left the night before for a night shift at the hospital, and my husband had a very early one. When I got home by 1 p.m., I found my puppy, 9 months, locked in the garage. He doesn't have access to that area because there's no AC there. This is Florida in the summer, and I'm afraid he'll run away when the door opens. It was pure luck that he was laying down so close to the entry door, or I could have ran him over before I saw him. He was lethargic and breathing heavily, so I immediately took him to the vet. He was overheated and dehydrated, and he could have passed if I hadn't got there when I did. I finally returned home at about 7 p.m. When I entered, I instantly saw my favorite vase, I got it from my late grandma, wasn't in the center table. I opened the trash only to find it there in pieces. I was already fuming about my puppy. When I pulled up the images from the house cameras I'd recently installed because of the dog, in the images I saw that at 9ish the kids said goodbye to my husband and their parents, and when they left, they proceeded to discuss whose turn it was to break something. My nephew argued that he had done it last year, so it was my niece's turn. My niece then proceeded to throw one grass on the floor, at which point my puppy got fussy and started barking. They got annoyed, so they took him to the garage before returning, picking up my vase and smashing it on the floor. When their parents returned, they simply said they had an accident. My sister cleaned it up and they made their way to the parks. My blood boiled. I immediately packed their bags and put it by the door. My husband arrived and helped out. As soon as they arrived, I told them how their kids behaved, that they caused harm to my dog and broke something irreplaceable to me. My sister tried to argue that it was an accident and that they're just kids, and I shoved the video into her face. She still tried to argue, saying we were family and she didn't have money to pay for a hotel for the rest of the trip, and it was the middle of the night. I simply stated I didn't care and she had to take her little monsters away from me. She left screaming and then crying. Obviously, this morning, I woke up to several messages in the family group calling me all sorts of names for kicking them out in a different country, and how I was being mean. My mom wrote about how disappointed she was at me. I didn't have the energy to reply to anyone back yet, but before I do, am I the jerk? I honestly hope OP's just making this story up. I mean, it's almost unbelievable to hear a detail like, well, I put cameras in my house and the kids came downstairs and said, well, it's your turn to break something this year. If OP's telling the truth, they're definitely not the jerk, and honestly, the way that they're deflecting and not taking any responsibility, I wouldn't just kick them out, I would go no contact and say, until you actually genuinely apologize, unless you try to do right by me, I'm not talking to you. Cryptographer Hot 8184 wrote, not the jerk. I'd be pressing charges for the poor pup if you can. Maybe then she'll realize how serious it is. I would never have her or her brats in my house ever again. She deserved it for defending her kids when the evidence was right there. Well done, OP, for sticking up for yourself and your poor doggo. If you can't press charges, I would cut her out of my life completely for that. She could have killed your dog with her negligence and refusal to watch her kids. OP responded saying, not that I don't think that a very harsh life lesson should be taught here, but I don't think I'll press charges as it could mean their deportation. Plus, an international legal battle could be expensive and I don't want that headache at the moment. Nonetheless, I'll be keeping copies of the video just in case. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not telling my stepsister her husband was paying me to watch their son when they were separated? My stepsister and her husband separated for over 2 years because my stepsister didn't feel like her husband was a present enough father. In his defense, he works a lot and is the only reason she has such an easy life. So our family did think she was making a huge mistake, but we chose to stay out of it because she's overly sensitive and would have taken anything we said the wrong way. Her husband didn't want to divorce, so she gave him a long list of terms he had to follow for her to consider getting back together. One of the terms were that when their son was with him, he couldn't hire a nanny to care for him, because she wanted him to prove he would put their son before work and everything else. Sometimes he just couldn't do it, so he asked me to watch their son multiple times, including once when he went abroad. He asked me not to say anything to my stepsister, and since the money was good, I kept his secret. My stepsister took him back 3 months ago, which is when our arrangement stopped. Unfortunately, my husband let something slip in front of her, which made her suspect. She asked me, and I'm horrible at lying, so it all came out, and now she's angry at both me and her husband. The aftermath hasn't been great, and she's considering leaving him again, which is making him threaten me and my husband in turn. My family are taking his side, even though none of this would have happened if it wasn't for him. Am I the jerk? I mean, fundamentally, the real issue here is OP went ahead and heard, oh, she doesn't want to do this, so I need you to work with me to lie to your stepsister. And OP going, oh, okay, yeah, I'm totally fine with being complicit in lying to my stepsister about this, especially for money. At this point, if I were OP, I would just kind of cut my losses, try to remove myself from the whole situation on either side. But that OP did play a big part in this whole thing going totally on its head and doing exactly what the stepsister was promised she wouldn't have happen. Embarrassed Advice 59 wrote, everybody sucks here, but mostly you and the husband. Your stepsister has every right to want to separate again because he lied about their child's care. You're not a stranger, but him lying is a massive breach of trust. Also, I feel like we need more context in how unreasonable her demands were. Not wanting to be a married single parent is a valid concern. Our next story is, am I the jerk for kicking my stepdaughter out? My husband and I are happily married and have one child together. He has one daughter from a previous relationship. We get along great with his ex and her husband. They weren't together long as they were lifelong friends who briefly tried dating and realized they were better as friends even after the birth of their daughter. Everyone gets along with the exception of their daughter, who really doesn't get along with anyone. She stayed with her aunt, and when she left a couple of weeks later, her cousin had to start therapy. The aunt went low contact with all of us. Her grandmother stopped having her for more than a couple of days because her blood pressure can't take it. She's been in therapy, asked if something has happened to her, but she is just defiant. She's been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. Her mother and stepfather have started therapy because of the constant stress of having her around. We told them that, of course, we would have her stay with us. It's been miserable. She goes out of her way to do the opposite of what anyone asks her to do. Refuses to do basic chores, i.e. picking up her own trash and dirty clothes. We gave her the household chore of vacuuming once a day in the 3 rooms that have carpet. It takes maybe 15 minutes. We found out she traded our son and then complained when she caught that it wasn't fair he got the easier job of watering 2 plants. We told her that not only is he only 8 years old, but he's developmentally delayed and has muscular dystrophy and can barely push the vacuum. Not only that, but he's nonverbal and couldn't tell her no. He just did as he was told. The last straw was when I went into her room to put clothes away and noticed her pile of leftover food and wrappers. I had told her multiple times it needed thrown away. I decided to do it that time because it was starting to mold and she would lose food in her room privileges. I picked it up and there were a couple roaches. We called an exterminator and he said they were only in her room and we were lucky to find it early, and it most likely happened instead of throwing her trash away, she just threw it out the window and left the window open. My husband says we shouldn't have kicked her out because now she resents us and feels we are giving up on her. I said I understood that as a parent, but at what point does she have to stop making all of us miserable? Besides, I think the best thing is to finally make her take some responsibility for herself. And despite efforts with therapy, attempted quality time, punishments, encouragements, he is just enabling her at this point. Ultimately, I purchased the house prior to marriage, and it's still in my name. I refuse to have my son live with someone who will take advantage of him and live in a house with roaches and mold. My husband and I are starting therapy soon for ourselves as well because of this, and she's staying with a second friend because the first made her leave. Am I the jerk? Did OP ever clarify how old the stepdaughter was? That would certainly help a little bit, but overall I'm assuming they're an adult, and if so, they're definitely not the jerk. Not only are they completely disrespectful, but they also push that into manipulating somebody who is too innocent to even help themselves into doing stuff for them and making the household even worse by leaving this trash out and inviting roaches. I mean, just a total nightmare. Purple Star 1965 wrote, "My son has ODD. It was difficult when he was younger. As he got older, he began to be able to regulate his responses. He learned to ask himself, am I really angry about X, or is it just my ODD telling me that? While he can still struggle with it, he also makes a conscious decision to relax. I can see him physically let it go. He learned through therapy and maturity to better regulate his. Your stepdaughter is making conscious decisions to not throw the trash away, not do chores, to be mean and ugly. Is it harder to not jump to resistance if one has ODD? Yes, it is. But if she had been in therapy, she should have learned her triggers and tips on controlling her reactions. She is choosing to act the way she acts, not the jerk." Time Water Traveler wrote, "Unfortunately, ODD is at times used as the only diagnosis, as children can't be diagnosed with personality disorders as they're still developing. While in most cases ODD does resolve with medication and therapy, it's unfortunately not a rule. At 19, she needs to be reevaluated as, to me, it sounds like there's something more serious going on." This next story is, am I the jerk for ruining a family vacation because I don't want to move into my parents' basement? I am 22-year-old male going on 23 in my 5th year of my undergrad, and my family likes to do long vacations every summer in their camper. They were traveling all summer and we met up with them, and from the moment we met up with them, my dad especially has not talked to me or been very nice towards me. He had his own share of stuff that happened on the trip with his truck, which is what I initially thought the issue was. After a few nights, my mom brought up how they wanted to renovate their basement into a one-bedroom apartment, partly so I can move in without rent, partly to raise the value of their house. This year, I had many problems with apartments, having to move 3 times because of roommates, ex-girlfriends, and/or landlord issues, which led to my parents trying to convince me it would be best for me to move into their basement. With my financial issues, they pitched it as a way for me to save money and stress. My brother's been following every piece of advice they give him, and he's obviously favored because of this, on top of his major being one that will start higher than I will probably ever end up with. I'm going to be a music teacher. I also had gotten caught smoking weed a few years ago, which I still do and don't tell them, but I feel like if I tell them anything about my life, it immediately is followed by advice I didn't ask for, or an opinion I didn't ask for. I told my family I didn't want to move into their basement because of the amount of fighting that happens whenever we live together, on top of me wanting to live independently, as I feel like I've always been relying on my parents and in their shadows. My dad was my high school science teacher, so I never felt like I was able to fully define who I was in school because of that. Another major issue we had back in the day. Long story short, now my parents think I'm being stupid for not doing the more financially smart thing and moving back in with them, when I have a full-time job as a manager of a restaurant on top of going to school. It's stressful, but not as bad for my mental health as me living with them full-time. I'm in a bit of credit card debt, but nothing a few months of work couldn't fix. Now I just feel like no matter what I say to them, I will be the jerk of the family for not taking their charity when I just want to live my own life and figure out who I am outside of them. They still do things like track my phone and refuse to let me have my own bank account and are still trying to pay for my school, but I feel like no matter what I do from here, I will be the jerk if I don't follow their advice. So if OP isn't allowed to have their own bank account, isn't allowed to kind of be their own person, how would it be that currently OP would be moving into the parents' basement? I'm assuming 5th year of your undergrad, it's like they're paying for an apartment or something currently? I think this is one of those situations where OP has to ask themselves, what's more important? Be the jerk in the eyes of your parents and have them kind of denounce you and call you an idiot and a fool for not taking their advice and doing what they want, or living your life the way you want to live your life with your own independence. I mean, at 22 years old, OP can't look me in the face and tell me they're forcing me to not have my own bank account. Fuzzy Mom 2005 wrote, "Not the jerk, but I'm struggling to understand something. If you're living on your own and paying your own bills, why are you letting them run your life? And they can put in an apartment and raise the value of their house without you living there, unless you're expected to pay for this renovation. Per your other comments, what are you paying them for anyway? My advice? Take 360 off your phone now. Open your own account today and transfer all your money to it. Just because your parents say you can't transfer money to them doesn't make it so." OP responded saying, "They still somewhat help with finances at the moment, mostly through my tuition. When I started school 4 years ago, they made a deal that they would pay for my tuition and I would owe them money through a loan to them instead of a bank. My 18-year-old self thought I was genius. The stuff I pay them for now mostly is just insurance and/or paying back bills I owe them from previous years of school, which makes it really hard to just cut them off since I am in debt to them." This next story is, am I the jerk because I, 28-year-old male, went on a fancy night out with my little brother, 20-year-old male, instead of my girlfriend, 25-year-old female? I live in New York City. I am not rich by any means, but I luckily inherited an apartment in my early 20s. So I'm not so poor that I can't afford to splurge for a night if I spend a few months saving for it, since I don't pay New York City levels of rent, which I do a few times a year. This time I had my eyes on a pretty exclusive restaurant. For example, I made the reservations for 2 in January. I didn't have a girlfriend or intend on making a date out of this when I made the reservation. Just wanted to casually have fun and enjoy the food and drinks. A few weeks ago, I got a text reminder about my upcoming reservation and I invited my girlfriend who I've now been seeing for 5 months. She asked where the reservation was for. I told her, and she said it was too expensive. I told her of course it was on my dime, and she still said no, that it was too expensive, she would feel too bad that I spent that much money on her. For the 3rd and final time, I asked her, told her I was paying and wanted to pay for her, and she said no. I asked a few friends and they all had plans or weren't interested, and then decided that I would take my baby brother. So the day of, we got dressed to the nines, we went to our reservation. Afterwards, we went to a fancy hotel and swam around in the pool. Walked around the city at 3 a.m. just having fun. Honestly, it was one of the best nights of my life, just being a big kid with adult money with my baby brother, and I told my girlfriend that verbatim when I got back to my apartment the next morning. She stayed the night with our shared cat. I didn't think I did anything wrong initially, but she started bawling her eyes out really heavily and telling me I had no idea how sad it was for her that I went out and had the time of my life while she was alone in my apartment. I asked why she was feeling so sad about it, and she said she thought I was planning something major and romantic, and that she was disappointed that I didn't try harder to get her to go. I didn't know what to do, so I apologized but reminded her firmly that I invited her multiple times, and she said she really wanted to go, but that she just felt bad that she couldn't pay for herself. I told her that sounds really immature. If I offer to do something and say I want to do it and you say no, I don't think it's cool to cry to me about how much you wanted to go. I tried to explain this to her, but she just cried harder. I don't know what to do. She has never acted like this. We don't argue at all. This is the healthiest relationship that I've ever seen or been in. I mean, I love her. I am really deeply in love with this girl, and I'm wondering if I handled anything about this the wrong way or insensitively. I told her that she was 100,000% invited on my next excursion, and she said she would think about it, but that this ruined the idea of her going on one with me. OP's 1,000,000% not the jerk, and no way do I think OP should allow her to say, you know, this whole thing just really ruined the whole thing for me. After all that's happened, I would have some very choice words that I can't say in a PG YouTube video. Bleep that OP tried their best to convince you to go, saying they wanted to do this for you. You can't turn around and start crying. You need to have communication. You want a healthy relationship? Be honest about it. Let's work through it. Her turning around now and saying, I don't know, we'll see, this whole thing maybe just ruined the whole idea. This vague, wishy-washy behavior, that is going to nuke the relationship so quick. Got to think about it wrote, not the jerk, she's immature. You've been dating less than 6 months. You asked her repeatedly if she would want to go with you. She said no. You took her at her word. This is not a battle that could be won. She would be upset if you didn't listen to her saying no, and now she's upset that you did listen to her for saying no. If you want to still be with her, you need to sit down and set your expectations for your communications. Tell her if you ask her a question and she provides you with a response, you are going to believe her response. Ask her what you were supposed to do after she turned down your request multiple times. Make her fully explain her logic. There isn't any, but you need to make her see it. Tell her you won't play mind games, that's a surefire way to ruin a relationship. If either of you says something, the other person needs to believe that it's the truth. She said no several times, so that was the truth. She doesn't get to regret her decision and try to blame you for her regrets. Scenarioing wrote, given her irrationalism, I doubt this rational attempt at a rational discussion will go anywhere except to clear the conscience of the author that he gave her the chance to come up with some sort of explanation or reckoning. Otherwise, worse things will happen in the future. This one is not a keeper. Our next story is, am I the jerk for yelling at my dad and grandparents for standing by my older half-siblings over me? I'm 16-year-old male, an affair baby. My dad's first wife was terminally ill and he had an affair with my mom throughout the 2 years of her life, and I was the result of that, born just after she died. My parents got married a month later and filed for divorce 4 months later, and Dad got custody of me. Dad's kids from his first wife hated me. They hated him too, but they despised me. They called me disgusting, said I should have never have been born. They told me they wished I could have died instead of their mom. It was awful. They were 11 and 12 years older than me, so old enough to be aware of what Dad did, and old enough to really hate me. Dad married for a third time when I was 5, and he had 3 more kids with my stepmom. My half-siblings cut contact with us, but we would see them at our grandparents' house sometimes, and they used to be nicer, though not loving exactly, to my younger half-siblings. They would always make sure I could see them treating them better too. My stepmom would brush me off if I mentioned how they treated me. Dad did nothing, and my grandparents used to scold me for not spending time with all my siblings during family holidays and stuff, which is when we saw them most frequently. If I mentioned why I was isolated, they would tell me it was all in my head. I had some really freaked up self-esteem issues for a while. I also know my family treated me like it was no big deal because I'm a guy, and if I'd been a girl, I can almost guarantee my feelings would have mattered more to my dad and grandparents. So the yelling thing happened 2 weeks ago. We were all gathered to celebrate my grandma's birthday. All the extended family were together and grandma wanted a photo of all her grandkids and great-grandkids. She has a few, including from one of my half-siblings. My older half-siblings said they refused to be in a photo with me and refused to have their kids be in a photo with me, and asked grandma if she really wanted a disgusting affair baby in the photo. Grandma was like, "Of course, we're all her grandkids." One of my younger half-siblings asked what that was, and one of my older half-siblings told them dad cheated on their mom and had me while their mom was dying, and it made me disgusting. I was still expected to get in the photo. I looked at my dad and my grandparents, who kept encouraging me to get in, which is when I lost it, and started yelling at them for standing by my half-siblings more than me. I asked how they expected me to be okay after crap like that is said, and nobody says a dang thing. I was scolded some more and grounded for ruining my grandma's birthday and raising my voice at them. Am I the jerk? I just want to hear from the people who legitimately think OP actually is the jerk here. I mean, really, I would love to hear what anybody has to say who says the OP is the jerk, or tries to downplay or minimalize OP's experience all their life. Scenarioing wrote, "Wow, your relatives are awful. Extremely so. I can only imagine what it's been like having no experience like that whatsoever. It's obvious you are not the jerk. This conduct going unpunished, uncorrected, etc. is outrageous. They all, except probably the younger ones, had it coming big time and still isn't enough." I don't know what you'll think of my last comment because it comes from someone that doesn't walk in your shoes, and maybe my perception is skewed. It seems like walking away from most of these people when you reach adulthood is in order. Finding a life with enriching friends, romances, and new family, all who know you through the lens of knowing how you are, not issues that you have zero control over. As you seek people who wouldn't be like your relatives, or at least not the types to be cruel about such things, if they had the same situation arise. Our next story is, am I the jerk for telling my dad he's lucky mom chose to stay with him despite his insufferable behavior? So my, female 20, mom and my dad recently got into an argument, and they haven't been talking ever since. My dad, for as long as I can remember, has been misogynistic. He would always downplay mom's feelings and emotions and would go as far as to say really offensive things about her while there were guests over at our house. His biggest fear is mom making important decisions or people thinking that he's not head of the family. He also continuously made comments about how women should do all the housework, that mom never worked, have been doing all the chores and taking care of 3 children on her own and also looking after dad's relatives. Anyway, their fight went as follows. Dad and my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, were sitting at the table and dad was making some snarky remarks about my sister's child. Mom got angry and told him, "If you're done eating and you don't like your granddaughter's company that much, then just leave." He got furious because he was humiliated in front of another man. They haven't been talking since, and he said he would never forgive her. Drama queen behavior, I know. Today they fought about it again. He told her to F.O. and repeated all the offensive things. Mom got really upset, started crying, and left. She also has a tendency to faint when she's overwhelmed. It's a medical condition, which we try to prevent, but he didn't care. So he started saying offensive things about mom to me, and I was like, "You know you're in the wrong, right? It's so stupid to blow this out of proportion, and you're lucky mom stayed with you despite your absolutely insufferable behavior when she could have and should have left like your 2 previous wives did." He told me I was the jerk. Reddit. Am I the jerk? In my opinion, OP turned around and hurled truth bombs at this guy, and what, he says, "Oh, OP's a jerk?" If anybody would know what it takes to make a jerk, that guy certainly would. B. Mandalore Tamad wrote, "Wow, not the jerk. What a stand-up guy, your dad. The way he treats your mom is deplorable. It shouldn't fall to the children to get in between their squabbling parents, but I agree that she needed the backup and you were brave enough and kind enough to provide it. Also, who the heck complains about their grandchildren? Even if they're total brats, just hand them back to the parent, smile and say, 'How cute.'" But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy Am I the Jerk Here story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.